Good afternoon. I'm so glad that you all could join us today for this webinar. It's the first time that we're going to try this virtual lunch and learn, and hopes that it's going to be something that you all find very enriching and intriguing and enlightening about our program. So we are so proud of the work we're doing at the Ansley School. I want to share with you all sort of a sobering statistic. The Atlanta Public Schools has recently released some information about testing, and they divide it up between children who are housed and children who are unhoused. And within APS, children who are unhoused are only reading at a proficient level at 7%. And that's just heartbreaking to me. That was in 2019. And now for the past year and a half, they haven't been in school. And so you can only imagine where that leaves them in their ability to catch up and really be competitive in the world. And so I am so proud of the work that we're doing at the Ansley School. And I'm especially proud of the group of scholars and experts that we have brought together to really create this amazing program. So I'm not going to spend too much time talking to you all because I know that you want to hear from our field of experts. And these are not just people that we have invited to come in that are not familiar with our program. These are people who are in and with our scholars in our program every single day. So I'm going to introduce them. First, we have Dr. Julie Washington. Julie is a professor in the School of Education at the University of California, Irvine. Most recently, though, before that, she was at Georgia State. She was a professor and she was department chair in the College of Communication Sciences and Disorders. She is also the director of the Learning Disabilities Research Innovation Hub, which is a federally funded initiative, and it's focused on the identification of learning disabilities in African American children growing up in poverty. She is a dedicated member of the Ansley School Board of Directors, and her research is focused on the intersection of literacy, language, variation, and poverty. In particular, her work focuses on understanding the role of cultural dialect in the identification of reading disabilities in school-aged African American children, and on disentangling the relationship between language production and comprehensive on development of reading and early language skills for children growing up in poverty. So Julie's got a tremendous amount of research and knowledge and experience in helping us to work with our young scholars. Carla Stanford is also with us today, and Carla is the Education Director and co-founder of Reading is Essential for All People. REAP, as it's known, is a nonprofit organization that's dedicated to improving reading proficiency in students through teacher training and enrichment. And REAP provides the Ansley School with specialized training that reinforces these foundations for reading. These training approaches are helpful for any child in any classroom, small group, one-on-one. They're especially critical for our struggling readers in our community. She's been educating children for over 20 years and has a real passion for unlocking the reading potential in all children. And then finally, we have today in our discussion, Kelly Wicks. Many of you all know Kelly. She joined us just a year ago as principal of the Ansley School. She has worked for 28 years or more in promoting, starting, and sustaining innovative programs that work with populations being underserved in the traditional schools. Most recently, she worked in the UAE to establish a formal public education system, and her approach to curriculum produced processes and methods that were adopted nationally by the Ministry of Education. Before that, Kelly led the establishment and growth of the Treasure Village Montessori Charter School, which became known throughout her district for its innovative approach to serving the whole child as a community that nurtured students from a variety of backgrounds. So I am honored to have these three really smart, well-researched women here to talk about this program and to help you all understand why the work we are doing at the Ansley School is so innovative, cutting edge, and so important to help our young scholars live beyond their circumstance and write a story of success and become strong readers in our community. I want to let you know that through this presentation, you all are welcome to use the question and answer chat box. Type in your questions. We will feed them to our panelists and have them answer them. And any questions that we are not able to answer today, we will be sending out an email to you tomorrow with the answers to these questions so that you can go back and look and find out everything that you needed to know about our literacy program at the Ansley School. So right now, without further ado, I am going to introduce a video. One of our young scholars and her mother talk about their experience with literacy education at the Ansley School. And after that, you'll listen to our panel. Thank you for being here.
Be like A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V, W, X, Y, and Z. Now I know my ABC. Next time, won't you sing with me? Yeah!
See, so that's why you're so good at communicating, because I got right away that your friends aren't moving as fast as you are, and you just gave me a really great example of what that means to you. That's impressive. Such a good mom someday. You're gonna, or maybe you'll make a good teacher. Maybe you'll make a good doctor. What do you want to be when you grow up? Right now.
I was going to be a doctor, but I want to be a beekeeper.
That's brilliant.
You can do that too. Once
That's
I
brilliant.
gave birth to Janie, and I actually talked to her just like I'm talking to you now. So her dad and I, we actually didn't do what most people call baby talk, the goo goo gaga stuff. We didn't do that with her. So we had normal everyday conversations with her from the time she was born until now. And I think she's been.
Yeah, when I wasn't taught what my sister taught me, I was making full sentences when I was 2.
Your full sentences when you were 2. I believe it.
Yeah, she made her first sentence when she was 9 months.
Okay, so hello, Victoria. Welcome back.
Hi, how are you?
Good. We spoke the other day with Janie Ann, your daughter, who's a student here and has been for a few years. And one of the things that came up in that conversation that was a little surprising to me was the fact that when we're working with Janie Ann this year, it's been super challenging, as it has for all of the kids. Can you tell us a little bit more about the virtual program, Ansley School, and why you're choosing Ansley?
Absolutely. So, I was glad to have the Ansley School because Janie Ann would still be on virtually, and I wasn't getting negative feedback like, oh, why are you in the car? You all were very accepting of the fact that I was a single mom. I am a single mom, and I had to do what I had to do to make sure that my child still received a good education. And I think that's where Ansley comes in. You all don't do the, okay, this is the way it is. You all are flexible. And, it's not a one size fits all situation because every family is different. And so I think the Ansley School is a blessing.
Well, that really touched me the other day when you said that, and I so appreciate the feedback. That's for sure. And I think you're right. Like, one of our goals at the Ansley School is to fill the gaps in for our parents, and part of that is being flexible and understanding. And for sure, your commitment to making sure Janie hit all of her classes was really amazing. And there we have it, right out of the mouths of the babes. Janie Ann, our star scholar. So hello, everybody. Happy to be here today. I've got my colleagues, Carla and Dr. Washington, with us today. And I'd like to start with talking to Dr. Washington about what the research says about talking to our children and having conversations and communicating with them.
Thank you, Kelly. I'm so happy to be here this morning and happy to be part of the Ansley family. The work that Ansley is doing is so important, and I love that video. Janie Ann and her mom are amazing, and her mother has figured out what we want all parents to know, that language is very important. And you can see how with Janie Ann, when she talks, that she's excited about talking and she's used to people talking to her and listening to her. You can tell by the way she communicates. I'm a speech pathologist, so I'm always happy to talk about language. And language is the most important development of early childhood. Every child, with rare exception, comes into the world wired to talk. So unlike reading, which is taught, oral language is, we are all wired to do it. The brain is ready for it when we're born. And the only thing that keeps it from happening is kids not being talked to. So as long as you talk to your kids, they will talk back to you, because they're wired to do so, starting at birth. So those early conversations are really important. And one of the things we often find with parents, because I know some of the parents at Ansley have babies at home, so I'm going to start at birth. So from the time that your child is born, you should be talking. And one of the things we hear from parents a lot is, why talk to somebody who doesn't talk back and don't really get it? And they understand that once their child starts talking, they should talk. But from the time your child is a baby, you should be talking to them. And their talk back to you is the smile, it's the babble. And so we talk about that early talk as color commentary in a football game. I love football, and that's what talk should look like to a baby. Just narrate your environment. Talk about what you're doing. Oh, I think I'm going to make some spaghetti. Where's the spaghetti sauce? And make eye contact with your baby. That's the beginning of conversation, those early conversations. Then as your kids get older, they will start to develop words. We expect to see the first word at 1 year of age. By the time your kids are 18 months old, they should have 50 words. That's our expectation, 50 different words at 18 months of age. So if they came to see me, that's what I would be looking for. By the time they're 3, they should have sentences of about 3 words. Their language should equal their age until they're about 5. 3 words sentences when you're 3, 4-word sentences when you're 4, and on and on and on. So why is language so important? Because it's the basis of so much that your kids are going to learn later. It's important for being able to interact in their environments. And then ultimately, it's important for interacting outside the environment. It is also the foundation of reading, which is what we're so focused on once your kids get to school, is the development of literacy, reading and writing skills. Reading and writing are language on paper. And so the really simple definition of reading is that your child comes to school and they encode what they know about oral language onto paper. And so the kids who have had the most conversation, who have talked, who have developed good language skills, are the ones who are going to come to the reading process with more ease. It will be easier for them because they have this foundation now to learn to read and write with. So we want to encourage parents to talk to your kids, to talk back, to have them talk back to you. There's no wrong way to have a conversation, but the best conversations are the ones where you say things that are open-ended and give your kids a chance to talk back. Not just yes, no questions, not just giving commands, but saying, oh my gosh, look at that tree. And it has red flowers. Then your kids will say, oh yes, I see that tree. And then it opens conversation. So the opportunity to go back and forth. And you don't have to be at home in a kitchen. You don't have to be anywhere special. You can be on the train and talk about what you're doing. You can be in your car and talk about what's going by. One of my favorite things to do with my kids was that I Spy game, where you say, I spy something that is green, and then everybody looks for it. Oh, I see it. There's a green, whatever. But those kinds of ways of starting conversation, I know Miss Carla's really good at that, and she's going to talk about it, about how to start conversations with your kids. But those early conversations that you have with your kids are the basis of reading, writing, and support what they're doing in school. And we're talking about young children right now, but those conversations should never stop. You should be talking to your kids throughout their childhood, starting at birth, going all the way to the age when they stop talking to you. And even when they stop talking to you as teenagers, you should keep talking to them. Language is important and communication is important throughout the lifespan. And I say from birth, but there are a lot of people who will tell you that you should also be talking to your child before birth. All of us realized when we had our babies that when we started talking to them, they look at you in a special way because they remember your voice. And so talking to your babies, talking to your babies when they're in utero, all the way through their lifespans as adults is really, really important.
Thank you, Dr. Washington. That was really good information and good reminders. And before we get to Carla, one thing comes to mind as a teacher as a lifelong educator is getting into the habit of asking open-ended questions. It's so easy to say, push in the chair instead of why do we push in the chair? So that they can process that information and respond back. And it's a really good way to just measure what they understand and what they comprehend, but it takes practice. It doesn't necessarily come natural to a lot of us.
That's right.
That being said, Carla, how do you integrate that into what you do? Because you and I teach together all year, 3 days a week, right? So I've seen you in action. Tell us a little bit about that.
So first of all, it's so great to be here. We are all super fans of the Ansley School. We are so thankful for the service that it provides for children and families, but it's also such a gift to us. And I just have to say that every day that I'm with these kids and these educators, it's a gift. It brings me joy. So I'm so happy to be here and to talk about talking, because I love to talk. And those of you that know me know that I love to talk. So I wanted to start by singing you a song, because this is what I would do with my kids. And it goes like this. Conversations are a two-way street. It takes both directions to make it complete. I'll talk to you, you'll talk to me. Conversations are a two-way street. Second verse. Conversations are a two-way street. It takes both directions to make it complete. I'll listen to you, you'll listen to me. Conversations are a two-way street. And I think that's one of the things that Dr. Washington said is so important, is that conversations are a two-way street. And it's about talking, but it's about listening and responding. And whether it be a kid that's nodding their head or giving a thumbs up or giving that, like, I agree with you, or a baby that is following you around the room and giving you some feedback, that conversations are a two-way street. And that what Dr. Washington said is the back and forth is what really adds the quality. And that's why you can't get that from a screen, right? You can't get the same level of growth of vocabulary and response from just watching TV or watching a screen. It's like what the person is giving back to you and the whole conversation. So I came up with like a little list of things. And this is, I'm not an art teacher. I want you to know that. I am a reading teacher, but these prompts might help us remember. One of the things that you can do is always ask questions. And you already heard Kelly say that, and you heard Dr. Washington say that. Ask questions. Who, what, when, why, where, how. Just constantly question when kids are talking, when you're having conversations. See how many times, and I have like this little puffball, how many times could the puffball go back and forth if you were throwing it, like, how was school today? And then they go, fine. And you say, well, what made it fine? Oh, well, I did this. Oh, well, who were you with? And that you're trying to see how many volleys you can get back and forth with the questions. Because I know if you're like me and you ask your child, my senior in high school, how was school today, it's going to be fine. And if I don't ask some more questions, then that's all I'm going to get. And that's not a quality conversation. All right. So questioning is one thing. Okay. This is my very terrible drawing, but it's two people, and you see the arrow, it's going back and forth, and it's just saying, hey, listen, always going back and forth. And do you see all the speech bubbles? All the things you used to hold in your head, say them out loud, just like Dr. Washington just said. When you're riding down the road and you see all of a sudden all the trees are blooming, and you say, oh my goodness, look at that tulip tree, or look at that pink tree. I wonder what kind of tree it is. Do you see the bird in it? Tell me what color it is. And you literally are just wandering, but it's out loud instead of your inside of your head. And all of a sudden your car or your home or your walk, it's all filled with this conversation where you're you're just going wherever it lets you go. And you don't have to, have it on a certain topic. You're not trying to teach a certain thing. You're just having this narration of what's happening in life. So that's my second one. All right. And then the next one that I like to do is the things to do list. So going over your schedule with your kids is really important for a lot of reasons. One is that it helps prep them for what's happening, but just talking through your schedule and asking questions about the day and having conversations, right, the back and forth about your day is a really nice way to remember to let them know what's happening, what's going on, and it builds in this conversation. And you might do it like at night before bed, or you might do it in the car on the way to wherever you're going. Hey, listen, remember today, your aunt's going to pick you up. And then after that, we're going to go to a doctor's appointment, and think about what you might want to do at the doctor's appointment. What might you want to do while I need to talk to an adult? And so you kind of are going back and forth with the schedule, but it gives a chance to insert conversation. And then I want to talk about, you could establish a place that you're like, this is our special place that we always have this certain conversation. And so this is going to be the Southern dialect that comes out in me right now. But one of the things that we would do in my first grade class and then at home was do this conversation starter called Y'all Know What. And I know we're not going to get Kelly to say that, but that's okay. So you would say, y'all know what? And then your family, whoever you're chatting with, would say, what? And then you would tell them a story from your life. And as you begin to do that every day, whether you decide you want to do it, at the dinner table or at bedtime or in the car or on a walk, what happens is you're establishing that every day you need to have something to say. And what happens is kids start to think about what they might want to say when it happens to them. Oh, I was on the swing and I was pumping for the very first time, the highest I've ever pumped. And so today when my mom says, it's your turn for y'all know what, then I know I'm gonna share that, because there's been enough modeling of options. And it doesn't have to be the best thing in your life or the worst thing in your life. It could just be, y'all know what, today when I was walking to my car, I stepped in dog poop, right? I mean, come on, it can be just like the ordinary things that happen, and the back and forth that you can get with that. And then the last thing I'm going to say is that when we read, we don't just have to read the words on the page. In fact, we could just look at the pictures and talk about it. And sometimes just the book that came home in the backpack could just be all about conversations. It could be, let's look at the cover. Oh, what do you see? What's going on? How does it make you feel? And that it could be a conversation starter, or you might only read one page in the conversation. Look at this. It goes back and forth so much. You're like, well, goodness, we'll have to finish this book tomorrow. So I hope that from what Dr. Washington said and what Kelly said and what I'm saying is that you understand, and I know that you know that this conversation, which we all do, can really build this vocabulary and this knowledge that gets kids ready to be strong readers and writers. And we don't have to be experts at teaching reading. We just need to be able to talk to our children, ask lots of questions, and make it a habit where sitting in silence or staring at a piece of technology is not the norm. The norm is like the chatter that happens back and forth. So those are just a few of the takeaways for the things I like to do with the kids that I work with. And I miss that in-person stuff. I can't wait to get back in to the in-person stuff. So hopefully that's given you a few tips.
Thanks, Carla. That was really great information. And that conversation song, I'm glad you shared it with everybody. Maybe they'll wake up at 3 in the morning with that tune in their head like I do. But the things that you do really make a difference. And when this lecture was coming up, it prompted me, because, I do the majority of the virtual teaching here at the school as well. And that sort of 2-dimensional instead of 3-dimensional learning is kind of becoming the thing nowadays, where I'm online for periods of time and I'm doing all the talking. It's fine because I'm a talker. However, when this topic came up, I stopped doing story time and started doing conversation time, and it was so painful. And the kids that really excelled were the kids that were really good at processing, whose parents really encouraged a lot of talking. And then there were the group of kids that didn't have the opportunity because there's so many siblings, or they just don't have the opportunities to do it because everybody's like so busy. So I'm in the process of backing up and not doing story time and doing conversation time, and telling them the difference between a question and a statement. A statement is something you want to say, and a question is something that needs an answer. And I can't tell you at 6, 7, 8 years old how difficult and how painful. And virtual is painful for a teacher and for the kids. It's a whole new level of painful, that I'm dealing with right now, because I forgot in this new virtual world that was almost just as important as the content that I'm teaching is their ability to communicate, talk to each other, and answer questions, have discussions, and what that all meant. I also find that whenever we have a new family or a new parent, they get a startling introduction to Miss Kelly, because I'll go walk up to them and I'm like, "Hi, what's your name?" Their name is Amira. Well, I know you know what their name is, but do they know what their name is? And I'm always asking questions to the student, and then the parents always answering. So that's something that's very common that I see often, and I always call parents out, and it's always sort of a little uncomfortable, but the point is that they're capable of answering, so let them answer. But as adults, even for my staff, having a noisy classroom can be really uncomfortable, but it's really important. And lots of times when it's noisy, if you can step back and look at the classroom, it's organized chaos. And that's a beautiful thing. And when I think sometimes make our kids be quiet, it's an adult need and not a child need. And that's something that I'm super sensitive to as well. And so here at the Ansley School, we try to take advantage of like every opportunity, so the walls are covered in stuff. We change it out. I drive the staff crazy because I'm bringing in weird plants and weird animals and weird objects because it stimulates conversation. Even the facial expressions and the body language that the staff comes in with is not only amusing and hilarious for me, but the kids play off of that, and it creates this really cool environment, where we want to talk about things and figure things out, and pulling in the staff sort of without them realizing it, by teasing them about animals or about crickets. I mean, it's really like sort of hilarious to see. I bring a bag of crickets into a classroom, and the buzz starts, the kids crack up, they start talking, look at the teachers, and it just brings about this really, really cool environment in a classroom setting and in a school setting. And I think we forget that. We forget that it's supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be like enjoyable. It doesn't have to be by the book. So often in schools, we're following a script. We're following where we need to stand and what we need to do. And we forget that it's supposed to be fun and enjoyable, and that we need to take time out of our schedule to do these kinds of things and not get caught up, in the academic aspects that so often overshadow all these other important qualities.
Well, Kelly, one of the things that is a good point that I think we forget with virtual conversations is all the things that you're talking about. The body language, the facial expressions, that nonverbal part of language is all missing. And so it makes it harder for kids to engage in conversations with you virtually because they're not getting all these social cues and nonverbal cues that they would get if you all were in the same space. And that is challenging for everybody involved.
It is, and I get off my virtual Zooms and I'm exhausted.
Yep.
And I'd much rather walk into the classroom and in person. And I think that's something that's going to be really important right now in this time, in this environment for our kids. As adults, we have what we have, at this point, but our students, our children are learning that and they're missing it. And I leave my Zoom on well after class is over so our students can talk to each other. Because they're missing that. Developmentally, it's where they're at. They want to talk. They want to see each other.
Right.
They want to do like big things. And I find myself stifling them to get through the time constraint. And they're just being them. Carla, you know, you've been there. We've been there together. We're just like, you know, I mean, we only have like a certain amount of time and there's only so much stuff we can get out there. You and I are talking a mile a minute and our poor kids are sitting there just being kids, you know, and we're just like, stop moving. Listen, we only have 30 minutes, you know, like that kind of a thing. So this virtual generation it'll be interesting to see how they fare.
Well, and they really push us on some of that. Sometimes Fridays are a little looser, and I always sing a Friday song, you know. So I can't sing, but I do sing. And so I sing a Friday song about, you know, it's Friday, what are you going to do this weekend? And when I first sang it, they were like, and now when we sing it, they all are ready. They know, they're ready to tell me, you know, what they're going to do. And then it's, even though I've never met them in person, they know about me and I know about them. So they start asking questions, and Kelly knows we're having this conversation and they're like, well, we want to meet your dogs. We want to meet your husband. We want to see your house. Like, tell us, we you know, and it's so funny because I'm like, academics or conversation. But the whole thing about the conversation, right, is we're building a community, and that's what you do in your family. That's what we do in schools. That's what we do on staffs. That's what we do in all of our social settings. And it's how you build community. And we're saying to you, it's how you build your students' brains. So, so necessary. And it's definitely something that our kids that are virtual are, the moment their little face pops up, they want to just start telling you, like, talking, and they see Miss Kelly. They're like, hi, Miss Kelly.
Well, Carla, tomorrow's a big day for us because, like most of our kids are now in person, thank goodness. It's only a small portion that still remains virtual. You're coming in person tomorrow, and it's going to make such a difference to have that in-person interaction where you can see the arms moving and the body moving, and they're going to be so much more capable, you know, of absorbing the information and having this dialogue back and forth.
Well, one of the things you've said a couple times, Carla, that is really critical for kids, especially kids at this age, is routines and scripts. So the kids over time have gotten used to your routine and they know how to respond. And so, and you also said the same thing about being at the table or in the car and establishing conversations at that time. Scripts are really important for little kids. They need to be able to know what's coming next. It puts them at ease. They're less anxious because they can predict what's going to happen next. And so those routines that you're doing are really important. It allows kids to know exactly how they should respond and be able to relax into your routine and contribute in important ways. And I wanted to say too, Kelly, something I didn't say earlier. There was a comment in the questions and answer thing. And it was about kids who don't talk when they should. And one of the things that if you have a child who's not talking, you may notice is more behavior problems. So kids who are having trouble with language or with talk often have difficulty with behavior also, because they want to talk and they want to communicate. And it's frustrating not to be able to talk and tell people what you think. So the more we develop language, the less we see those kinds of issues. Like people talk about the terrible twos. You don't turn 2 years old and automatically become a tyrant. Usually it's that your brain has more in here than you're able to actually express. And so the frustration of wanting to talk to people and communicate with them and not being able to results in tantrums. And so being able to talk and communicate has really important outcomes for kids in terms of their ability to be in social environments and behave well, and also to learn new things. So I just wanted to say that because there may be parents who are dealing with those kinds of issues related to kids who aren't talking yet.
That's a good point. And as a matter of fact, we've seen it. And as educators, we probably have all seen it at some point. If there's a hearing issue that hasn't been diagnosed yet and there's been a delay, you know, and those kids are really struggling because it's not that they can't understand what's going on around them. It's just that they can't process and get it all out.
That's right.
Yeah, it's a really good point. And I'm sure you guys know, but I don't know if everybody else knows out there, that we actually have volunteers that come in just to talk to our kids. So we have volunteers that come in to spend time on playground and eat lunch with our kids, just to have conversations, because we know it's so critical and it's so important. And although our class size is small and we're heavy in staff, this is not enough. There's not enough time and opportunity to talk to every single child and have these really great conversations. So we enlist the help of volunteers.
Yeah, that's excellent. Really excellent. And you brought up the hearing issue. I think sometimes parents don't know, because at this young age, ear infections are really common. And when your kids can't hear, when your kids have an ear infection, they can't hear. It's the way that doctors talk about it is like listening to somebody talk underwater, because your kids' ears are full of fluid. And so that's why getting those ear infections taken care of quickly is very important, because it impacts language development. It slows it down.
So Dr. Washington, I know we're getting close to the time where we open it up to questions and answers, but we have I know what your background is, and I know today we have a speech pathologist here observing and watching our students. What are you guys looking for, and what do you encourage us teachers to do with our kids at school and at home? What are you speech pathologists looking for?
We're really looking for kids who are using sentences that are appropriate for their age group and have a good use of words. We're also looking at speech, because speech and language are not the same thing. So language is your sentences and your words and how many you have and how you're using them. And speech is your sound system. And that's what people pay attention to a lot in little kids. Kids who say wabbit instead of rabbit. Those kinds of things are developmentally appropriate. But at the age of the kids at the Ansley School, we want to know that kids are intelligible, so you can understand what they're saying. And it's not the teacher. Teachers understand everything. Parents understand what kids say all the time. But if your kids should be able to talk to someone who has never met them before and have them understand them. That's what we're listening for at that age group, because not being intelligible makes it really hard for you to communicate and for other people to communicate with you. So we're looking for kids to have diverse words, so a lot of different words that they know, the ability to put those words together to make sentences that allow them to communicate with other people. And we're just looking for that to grow over time. The more you do that, that's why they need a rich language environment where people are talking to them all the time, where people like Miss Carla are teaching new words that can be used in new ways. And so we're looking for growth in language over time in the classroom, and for kids to be able to use their language skills in ways that allow them to interact with people in really positive ways, not using your words to hurt people or screaming at people, but learning how to use words appropriately in a school context and in any social context. And so as a speech pathologist, I'm always looking for kids to be using words as we expect at their age. But one of the things that we know is that kids who are growing up in poverty and who have other things going on in their lives, sometimes it can look like they have language problems when they don't. They just need more talk, more enrichment, more good modeling and interaction in order to become stronger language users. So we're just looking for language to grow so that it supports everything that you're trying to do in school. And we want your talk to be clear. At 4 years old, your talk should be clear. We should understand everything you say. At 5 years old, we certainly should. And if you have a child who's 4 years old that you can't understand, that's a child who probably needs to see a speech pathologist to get those speech sounds cleared up. But we should be able to understand everything. Doesn't mean you have all your sounds, because you still might have some missing at 4. That's okay. But we should still be able to understand everything you say. That's what we're looking for.
That's perfect. Thank you. But and real quick, Carla, I know here comes Kate, but real quick, the difference between phonemic awareness and phonics
So phonemic awareness is all about the ability to hear sound. And when we add print to that, the visual piece to that, then that becomes phonics. So for example, if I say, you know, this is a mug, everyone repeat mug, and I want you to punch out the first sound, that's all about phonemic awareness. But if I say, what letter would I write to represent the sound, then it becomes phonics.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
The way you describe it. Hi, Kate.
Hi, I popped in because I actually have a question. And I will say, I failed to introduce myself when I came on for anybody who doesn't know me, but I'm Kate Kennedy, and I'm the president and founder of the school. And I started the school because of my passion around educating these children who just seem to me to be really falling through the cracks. And so I'm not an educator, and so I rely on this esteemed group of people to really build this tremendous program for our children. And I was reading with a scholar the other day, and she blew through. She's a first grader. She's been with us for 3 years. She blew through the word Wednesday, which is an impossible word to sound out. But she knew it. It was a sight word. She knew it. She got to hippo at the end of the sentence, which in my opinion should be an easier word to sound out, and she couldn't do it. She didn't know what it was. It wasn't familiar. She didn't know what a hippopotamus was. She had never heard that before, which just kind of makes me think what you all are saying, right? That it's the conversations and the building of the vocabulary seems to really affect their reading. And so Julie, I guess I wanted to ask you, that is part of the problem, right? And for our children that are experiencing homelessness and living in poverty, is the low language exposure that they have affects their reading.
And that was a great example, Hippo versus Wednesday. Oh my goodness. But the reality is that when we talk about vocabulary, we're always talking about words, but vocabulary is word knowledge plus world knowledge. That's how you develop a vocabulary. And so in the population of students that we serve at the Ansley School, what often is missing is world knowledge. And so she couldn't read the word, not because probably she couldn't sound it out, but when you start sounding out a word, you search your mental dictionary and figure out what that word is. And if it's not in your dictionary, then it stops you at that word. And so that dictionary is created through world knowledge. So when your kids go to the zoo, it's not just so that they can have fun. Fun is great, and they will have fun, but it's so they're learning new things about animals and learning new things about all the experiences they're having. So that's an example of how world knowledge made it hard for her to sound out that word because she couldn't figure out what it meant. She might have learned the phonemic awareness from Miss Carla, so she could sound the word out, but it wasn't meaningful. So she couldn't tell you what it was. And that's a great example, actually. And now you know I'll be using it everywhere.
Well, there you go. I'm honored.
Said as a principal, the only excused absences I ever gave were travel, because travel was the best teacher.
Yeah, that's what my father said. He was like, travel is like an absolute great teacher, but it's because of the world knowledge you get.
Right. And definitely for our kids who may not get out as often, bringing in plants and animals this year has been really amazing because they haven't had a lot of that in their lives. And outside of the standard animals, so when you bring in bearded dragons or you bring in tilapia, it's interesting, and it creates this whole series of conversations that we wouldn't otherwise have if we just didn't have those kinds of things in their lives.
And they're learning rare words, which is something that the literature shows is really important. So there's the common words that you know, but the rare words like tilapia are words that help kids really build their vocabulary.
And Wednesday is a day that we talk about all the time.
Yes. They know all kinds of animals at the Ansley School, and they serve them in very, very good ways. Julie, will you talk a little bit about, and I know people ask you this all the time, but about code switching, because I think for our population, that's such a critical thing for educators and parents to understand that we're not teaching, quote, white English in school. We're teaching the common English, and then you have your cultural codes, right? That are perfectly fine to use in context. Did I say that correctly?
Yeah, one of the ways I've been talking about that a lot lately is that there's an oral language code and there's a written code. And so the oral code is the one you use when you're talking to each other, that you use in your community with your family. But then there's a written code that has a different rules, a different standard. Words may be written differently than you pronounce them. And so that's not about being white or black. It's about learning how to read and write. And so this distinction between what you're doing with oral language, because when I talk to my friends, I sound very differently than I do when I'm talking in this environment. Yes. And so we all have these codes that we use in different places. With our families, we talk to our children differently than we talk to adults. And so those codes are all really important. Those are oral codes. There's also a written code. And so for kids to learn to read, they have to be able to bridge the written code and the spoken code so that they know how to sound out a word the way it's written and not the way it's said. I'm actually writing a paper about this right now. And so it's like on the tip of my tongue. That code switching is really important. And people think about it as, a race or culture issue. It's a culture issue to the extent that your oral language often derives from who you are and what community you live in. And that's important, and we should honor that. Then when you come to school, you need to take that oral system and be able to encode it into a writing system. And sometimes when your oral language and the written system have places where they don't match, it makes it harder for kids to learn to read, and we have to spend more time in those spaces.
Thank you. That was helpful. Anybody else want to chime in on that? No? We have another question in the box. Did you all see this?
And I think it's a good question between Dr. Washington and Carla, because it talks about a child who can talk intelligibly but struggles with S. S as in school, S as in snuggles. So that's like the, instead of rabbit, wabbit, sometimes the S's can be sort of tricky.
Well, S is it's called a fricative, and it can be tricky. And it is, depending on how old the child is, S is really, really common, is a really commonly used phoneme in English, which is why you notice it when someone can't produce it. And so if the child is really young, it's okay that you can't produce S. But if the child is over 6, then they should be able to produce it and produce it without a lot of trouble, unless there's something going on with your teeth. That also impacts the ability to produce S.
We have found that a good bit in our scholars. We actually had a scholar come to us who in the beginning, we really thought that she had some autistic tendencies, or, we couldn't figure out what was going on with her because of all the different problems, struggles that she was having with her motor skills and with her reading. And she just needed glasses. And we got her glasses and it completely turned around. And so I do think that happens to a lot of children sometimes when they're living in poverty and their needs are not being addressed because they just can't.
I had a doctoral student when I was at the University of Michigan who was considered a delinquent when she was young, and it's because she couldn't see. And when she got glasses, she was one of the highest performing students in the class once she could see. And but for so long, she had all this behavior and they thought she was headed for trouble. And really, she couldn't tell them, what was going on because she had never been able to see well. And so she didn't understand that it was a problem because it was always the way it was. So that's really, it's important for us to make sure that whatever we can do to support success for kids, we do, whether it's about hearing, speaking, or seeing.
And in
Go
our
ahead.
environment, in our trauma-informed environment, we have to weed out a lot of other things besides just the physical aspects related to language, like the seeing and the hearing and the speaking part. We're weeding out emotions, we're weeding out the effects of life on our students and trying to sort of figure out, is it a physiological issue or is it an emotional issue or is it both, to try to get them over the hump at a really young age.
Right. Lauren's question in here about the S, it's because it's in a cluster of consonants. That's why it's hard. So it's because it's followed by another consonant that the S is hard. And so putting those two sounds together is probably the issue. And just practicing saying those sounds where S is the first sound and it's followed by a P or a C or an N in different words in a fun way would probably be great. You could use books to do it, actually, where you're talking about spoons and eating snacks and going to school and just practice it. I mean, there's no reason for it to be painful.
Rhyming is a big, Carla enlists rhyming as a huge
Yes.
technique.
Yeah, that takes a lot of practice.
Especially in the South, where not all the rhymes, not all the words that should rhyme do.
We have one more question here, and I'm going to give this to you all and give you about 1 minute to answer it. How about that? Can you all see it? Can you connect the code switching conversation to learning to express yourself in writing? That's such a big part of being in school, is writing.
Oh, yeah. I mean, code switching in writing is a huge issue. We wrote a paper about that last year. And there are people who study that in particular. But one of the things that's different about writing is in oral language, we allow a lot of variation. So you can say all kinds of things like spaghetti, but in writing, it's only spelled spaghetti. And so writing has its own like mandatory code. And and a lot of times we don't spend enough time on writing because some kids will learn to read better because they're writing, and they'll learn things about oral language from writing. And so we should be attending to all those things equally because writing is an important part of sort of that communication triad, I would say. Reading, writing, and oral language, they should really go together at all times.
And are we losing writing as an art form?
We are. And we see it at the university level. We can tell that people haven't had enough practice writing, enough experience with writing. And so their oral language skills develop, but their writing skills don't. And I saw it with my kids that they didn't spend enough time on writing. And you continue to see kids developing their writing skills well into college because they didn't get enough experience with it. And so, yes. And we don't teach cursive anymore. So I have one kid who can write cursive and one who can't because they're 4 years apart. So yeah, writing is being lost. And for a lot of kids, their ability to express themselves may be better in writing than oral language. And so you're not giving them the chance to express their strength if you're not writing. Writing's really, really important, and we're losing it.
Agreed. We see it at every aspect, at every level.
I bet.
In education of 30 years, what a difference from the 1990s until now,
Yeah.
and how that's affected written language.
Well, ladies, I want to thank you all so much for joining us today. And we want to honor everybody's time and close out. And I'm so glad that you all could be here with us. And people ask all the time from the beginning of when I first started thinking about the school and getting it together is why do you want to compete with the public school? Why don't you just, join with the public school? And public schools are doing an excellent job, the best they can. But logistically, as you've seen, our scholars who are experiencing homelessness and so much trauma need so much extra support beyond just the academics, even to get to the academics. We've got to figure out, what do they need? Glasses? Do they need trauma care? And then how do we start with a child who hasn't been exposed to as much language as they should be to really catch up as a reader? And so the work that we're able to do at the Ansley School, really thinking outside the box, being able to be innovative, I think it's been really important. And I've seen a tremendous difference in our scholars, and look forward to working with all of these experts in the field to create a program that's cutting edge and is able to serve these young children. So we're going to send out to you tomorrow. You'll receive an email from us, and one thing it'll have in it is a survey. And I would invite you to fill out the survey, because what we would like to do is have these sort of events, maybe in person one day, virtually, maybe some sort of a combination, and bring in the experts that work with our kids at the school to really address some of these special issues that children who live in poverty have to deal with, just to live beyond their circumstance and just to be competitive in the world, because that's our goal for our scholars, is to let them to be competitive in the world. So we'd love your feedback on what kind of information you'd like to hear. Academics, trauma care, homelessness in general. We would really appreciate that feedback so that we can begin to educate the community as part of our mission on the needs that we feel need to be met to make sure that these young scholars can write a story of success. And then the last thing I want to say, because I have to say it, is that it takes our community to make this happen. We're completely privately funded and tuition free. So I wanted to let you all know we're getting ready to roll out a whole new package of fundraising options. But what's really interesting is when we look into our program and we divide up how much it costs to educate each child in certain areas. We've been focusing right now on our literacy education. And so I wanted to let you know, for $3,000, you can support one scholar's literacy education, which includes regular work with Ms. Carla and with all of the professionals from REAP. It includes the research and the advice and the wisdom and knowledge coming down from Julie and all of her connections. And as well, Kelly is on board with them every day. Our teachers are getting a tremendous amount of training. So each scholar, we spend about $3,000 on just on their literacy education during the year. And I want you to know that during this talk today, we have sponsored 3 children's literacy education for the year. We've raised just over $9,000 today, and so we are thrilled with that. We would love to do more. So continue to really consider if this is a program that you'd like to support. For $50, we can purchase a bundle of culturally competent books, which is really important for our scholars to be reading books with people who look like they look and whose lives look like their lives look, as well as people who look different than they look, so that we can be very well-rounded. And so we will purchase those books, and that's a $50 donation. If you're really thinking outside the box and you're thinking, I have all this extra money that I don't know what to do with, $30,000 will take one of our scholars from their entrance into pre-K through their graduation from 8th grade, their entire literacy education. And we will be able to send them to high school, good readers, good writers, and passionate about learning and language. So I invite you, please, to think about making a donation to the Ansley School so that we can support our partners REAP and their work with us and all the work that we're doing. I think our website was in the chat, theansleyschool.org. And I just really thank you all for joining us. And I look forward to this continuing conversation. So everybody have a great day. And we hope to see you very soon. Thank you.
Thanks, ladies.
Thank you.